So thanks for coming this morning. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Kurt. My wife Hannah is here with me this morning. We have a family of 8 children. Our oldest just got married this past year, so kind of new stage of life for us. Home for me is northeast Kansas, so just 4 miles from Nebraska. We farm in Nebraska, down by Fall City, and in Kansas. I have 2 brothers that farm full time. 2 of us do drip, and another brother that's a pivot dealer. So we have pivots and drip on our farm, and use both of those. So we definitely talk to how both of them work, and also I think as we go through some of the agronomy things today, one of the things we've done on our farm is we use our drip acres kind of as our research acres, right? It's a lot easier to do research, a lot easier to test things out, test products, test practices. And do all of those testing things, and then we eventually apply those to our pivot irrigated acres as well. Our part of the world is a little different. If we drill a well, we're doing good to get 10 gallons a minute. So pretty low capacity wells in our area. So we have resorted to building reservoirs and irrigating out of reservoirs. So this is a system we've installed over the last 10 years at our farm. So every one of those blue pins is a reservoir, and then this blue line is a pipeline that goes 4.5 miles. So we have there's a pretty good sized creek here, and then we've got a pipeline that goes through here, and so it fills up all of these reservoirs along the way. And then all the red and purple pins are the irrigation systems, either pivots or drip, along there. So that's how we irrigate in our part of the world. I come up here to Hastings, Nebraska, and you guys just poke holes in the ground and get all the water you need. So I'm a little jealous, but we make it work.
Quick question on that, restriction-wise, what?
Yeah, so everything's Kansas. If you can collect surface water in the off season. So in other words, we can only pump out of this creek from September to May. So in other words, our reservoirs have to hold the water for irrigation season. So they let us capture I forget what the terminology is in Kansas, but yeah, basically we can capture the water, just not during irrigation season. So there's a lot of restrictions and permitting that goes into that. So, but yeah, that's our irrigation system at home. And then our headquarters is right here, and then my wife and I live just 1.5 miles down the road. So.
So what size is that pipeline that runs?
We've got a 12-inch pipeline that goes through there. Yeah, so we can transfer, I forget, I think we can do about 2,000 gallons a minute if we push it pretty hard.
So are you on both sides of the Nebraska border?
Our farm is, our irrigation, that particular irrigation system is not. It gets within 2 miles of Nebraska. So yeah, Nebraska would be much more difficult to put reservoirs in. Like we've tried, and they've made it pretty difficult in Nebraska. You could do it, but you gotta go through way more engineering. Kansas has some pretty lax laws on, I shouldn't say lax, but they give farmers waivers for building reservoirs, and in Nebraska they don't. It's kind of what we ran into. So, and the Army Corps office in Kansas City is a lot more friendly than the Army Corps office in Omaha. So there's a difference there too. So imagine that. Our team, and I think there's probably a few updates on here that we need to make, but this kind of gives you a quick snapshot of our team. We've got a number of them here today, like Trevor already mentioned. Certainly thankful for everybody that puts in time. Trevor already mentioned this, so I won't spend any time on that. One note that I wanted to cover real quick is how our service team is structured. So for those of you that have systems that work with us, all of our service teams are dispatched out of Hiawatha. Okay, so if you need service work done, you could call Trevor, you could call Greg, Pierre, and they would turn around and call Hiawatha. So and get that information to the office in Hiawatha. So the most direct source to get service work done is simply to call Hiawatha. You're welcome to call these guys as well, but just know that that's the routing of how everything is done. Most of you probably know that we have Hispanic guys that work for us. They're on the TN visa program, which is a really good visa program, but some of them are not the best English speakers. Some of them are, some of them are not. And so if you need translation, Dicha is he leads our service team, and he's also very good at bilingual, so he can help if you're having issues communicating with guys in the field. He can help with that. So Trevor can get you these numbers, Pierre, any of us can get you the guys' phone numbers, but just a little lay of the land of who's doing what. Okay, what does NutraDrip all do? And you'll hear about different pieces of this today. Obviously, we're designing, installing, and maintaining drip irrigation systems. We're doing some fertilizer products for irrigation, so some fertigation for some specialty products. Moisture probes and imagery, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Irrigation as a service. We have some customers, especially guys who aren't used to irrigating, where they actually rely on us to turn their systems on and off or tell them when to turn their systems on and off. So we will remotely monitor their probes, remotely monitor their imagery, and we will physically turn things on and off for them if we need to. So if that's of interest to you, those are things that we do, and we can help advise on when to water and how much to water. Irrigation agronomy, which we'll spend quite a bit of time on today, and then manure separation. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the manure side of it. I'll touch just a little bit on it at the end of this talk. A couple quick notes on EQIP. And Trevor, feel free to hop in and throw any other contacts or any growers that have had some specific experience recently. One of the things we have learned about EQIP applications is it's important to stack practices. Okay? So what that means is if you go into the NRCS office and you say, I want to do subsurface drip irrigation, and that's the only practice code that you put on your application, your rank is going to be towards the bottom. If you stack that practice code and you say, I want to do cover crops, drip irrigation, irrigation and water management, multiple different practices, and specifically, if you include something that has to do with regenerative, which I do not know those practice codes at the moment, what they are. Trevor?
So Ryan, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but maybe Ryan had some pretty good success. He was the first one in, what you said, the United States that got recruited for it.
So I did a, application with them, and I went in there and basically started talking to them about, doing things more regeneratively. I'm just saying I'm a new farmer, right? So I have gravity irrigated field, so that was a big step. And then I was in a zone where, we have to manage nitrogen. So we talked about, doing something with the fertility. And then, then I also talked to them about regenerative. And they said, if you didn't bring that up, we wouldn't even write it down because they have so many applications in there right now that they'd have to redo all those applications, so they're not really, going out and seeking out growers and telling them, hey, you need to check this box. They're just letting them sit. And so that's good information to get these guys because they rank mine. And then I put in for the, regenerative farming thing, the new app they have. And actually they called me up and said I was the first one in the United States to put in and get it. So then the head of the lady, the head of the NRCS wants to come out and meet me and shake my hand and everything else. And I'm just telling you this, I'm very new to all this stuff. So, but anyway, that's what my experience was. But I'm just saying you need to try to do all you can, I guess, and to get ranked up for those things. And they have quite a bit of money there sitting there. So, and they actually paid for all the seed for 3 years to put in all the seed. They paid for the whole, all the hookup and everything else. So we just did the Cadillac system and see where we go with this. So.
And you applied in January?
In January.
And it was approved in March.
Right.
So normally EQIP applications are 12 months, it seems like at least, and so it expedited it, plus it got to the top of the list. So kind of some new information, and hopefully we'll have some more specific details.
Did you have to, when you put in the system, did you have to have a professional come around and make the plan?
Yeah, I just had these guys put the plan together for me on the drip section.
RTSP.
You now can do that.
Yes, yep.
Because 2 years ago, I don't think you could.
No, we did those 2 years ago too.
How come we had somebody else from Kansas had to come up?
Well, he is our TSP, so our TSP lives in Kansas, John Maxwell, yep. So
Okay.
that's still part of the process. Yep.
But I, talking with Trevor, this lady that is the head of it actually in Buffalo County, she's pretty, apt and, they kind of rolled through the process pretty fast and they worked on it, where they said other counties probably ain't gonna have that experience. You're gonna have to be in there and be working on them to get them to get going, so.
Your location must be around Kearney then?
Yeah,
So yeah, the one thing we see working with NRCS, and we work in 10 different states, and your individual NRCS office makes a huge difference on how much money you get, how you get ranked. Like, it's almost up to the grower to educate the local office is kind of what we're finding. Like, there's so much new information coming from Washington, they're not up to speed on it. And so we're trying to put together some resources so that when you go in to apply, you know what questions to ask and what boxes to check and all that. So look for more information from us if you're interested in that going forward, because there is a lot to learn there.
I might even throw in on that, if you are getting ready to apply for EQIP or Regenerative, let our team know. Like, we're happy to sit down with you, and we're not the foremost experts on it by any means, but we do work across the broad geography, and so we've seen some things that are working and potentially some practice codes to stack that we can at least provide that information and discuss it with you so you can consider those different practice codes for your operation and see if they fit.
Okay.
I haven't gotten the letter yet saying I'm approved, but they were out walking the field already.
It's a good sign. Yeah. The cultural practices is still something, cultural resource, they still have to do all that, it's still in place. We're trying to get that removed or expedited because it can slow projects down.
One other thing too is like, there was like a soil sample they do, and it's like to see where you're at now to where you're gonna be type of deal. That was another big box to check that people don't. I'm just saying, most of you guys are soil sample. This is a little more intensive. I mean, it's more like a biology type of, more of a organic
Soil health,
type of soil health type deal. And I don't know. Like I said, you just keep checking the boxes, and pretty soon you get up there, I guess.
Yeah.
They said there's 100. They said the other day, Trevor, that there was 150 other applicants. They're just waiting there, and I just went in there in January.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
not.
There's a lot of people in the queue, but you're right. Stacking them, regenerative, puts you to the top, it looks like. So, and we heard that we had a meeting with the national sorghum producers here 6 weeks ago, and they had kind of clued us into this, that is, like, they actually have people that will do your application for you or help you through that process, and then they charge for it. Like, it's a service they provide. And so we just took a few clues from that, hey, there's some opportunity to do that just simply.
With that being said, I know there's some local NRD people here today learning more about the system, and some of the drip systems have some cost share through the NRDs also, and they work closely with the NRCS.
You're good. Okay, I want to talk just a little bit about management of irrigation. And I'm not going to go super deep into this, but some high-level practices that I think are important to note. I put this chart together here over the winter, and I think it just does a good job of teaching how we need to think about irrigation. And what I've got here is I've got a blue line on the infiltration rate of sand, of a sandy soil. Okay, so if you get a 1 inch per hour rain on a sandy soil, nothing's going to run off, right? That water can penetrate that quick. You're going to get good infiltration. You move down here to a loam, and a loamy soil is going to infiltrate water at a 1/2 inch per hour on average. Okay, a clay loam, we're at about a 1/4 inch per hour, and a clay soil, we're at a 1/10 of an inch per hour. Okay, so we all see this, we know this, right? You get a heavy rain on a clay soil, and at 1.5 inches an hour, a really heavy thunderstorm, and you're going to have a lot of runoff. Sandy soil is not going to run off. A drip irrigation system that we typically design at 0.03 inches per hour. Okay, not all irrigation systems, not all drip irrigation systems are designed at that rate. There's other designs that are done where they will put a design together, and they might be clear up here in this 0.2 or a lot higher precipitation rate. And what happens is if you oversaturate the soil, water goes down. Okay, and so what I did here is I modeled different emitters. So I've got a 0.1 gallon per hour emitter and I'm doing 12 hours of watering, but I'm doing 2 hours on and then 2 hours off, and then 2 hours on, 2 hours off. So I'm cycling the water. This one here, I modeled it and I said just run a 0.1 gallon per hour for 12 hours straight. This one here, I did a 0.26 gallon per hour for a 24-hour set, which is pretty common for a lot of drip irrigation systems that have been done in the area. Notice what happens to the water when you oversaturate it. Gravity wins, right? The water goes down. You end up leaching it. One of the things that was shared at one of the NRD meetings last fall, I believe it was, is that one of the highest water users in a specific geography was a subsurface drip irrigation system, right? And that's just maddening to me because drip irrigation, you should use a lot less water. But the problem is you can over-irrigate with drip irrigation because of this practice right here. If you just go turn your system on and you don't have a moisture probe in the right spot, let's say you've got a moisture probe sitting here, you're never going to pick up on what's going on, right? And that water's just going to go down, especially in a sandy soil or even a silty or a loamy soil. That water's going to go down. And so I want to plant the seed of understand that short cycles help the water move out and up. Okay, oversaturating that little area around the dripper is a bad thing because once that area gets saturated, that water goes down. Okay, it's somewhat hard to, because you can't see it, right? On the top of the ground, it stays dry the whole time. You don't even know the system's on. But understand that this is happening if you over-irrigate with the drip system. So I just feel like we need to do some education on that. This is a graph of that pattern of irrigating for 2 hours and then shutting off for 2 hours. Irrigating for 2 hours, shutting off for 2 hours. Versus this line up here is just watering for 12 hours. So it starts here, it comes up, it saturates it, and then it's in the saturated zone for like 10 hours. Versus we irrigate, we give it up to saturation, we drop back down. So using a drip irrigation system properly is super important to get efficiency. It's not automatic that you're going to get efficiency just because you put drip in. One of the other things that we've done in particular is we choose a low flow emitter. Okay, so there's lots of different emitters that we could put in that drip line. We purposely choose the 0.1 or 0.16 gallon per hour because it puts us down here in this precipitation rate. We can still put on, so if you run this for 24 hours, you're still putting on like 7/10 of an inch per day, right? So if a grower says, well, I don't want to ever get behind, well, you can still water 7/10 of an inch per day, right? Way more than the plant's going to need. You can catch up with that. So you don't need high precipitation rates to still get out a lot of water. So just something to think about, and just kind of want to plant the seed on that as far as how you manage irrigation through a drip system. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay. One of the other tools that we're starting to look at is measuring the oxygen level in the soil. And there's two different ways to do this. There's two different sensors. One of them is an actual soil oxygen sensor. There's a company that makes a little sensor and you bury it in the ground and it actually measures the oxygen level in the soil. The other one is what's called a redox sensor, and redox is it's basically measuring the oxygen demand in the soil. And you're going to hear about redox as a company. There's actually a company called Redox, and you'll learn more about that, and they are interconnected. But redox is a general term for oxygen demand. Okay, it focuses on oxygen. So we installed a couple of these last year, so this is our first year of data we have with this. So this red line here is our redox sensor. Okay, the green line is the soil oxygen. Okay, look what happens here. You can kind of see we've got a trend. We were really saturated here in July. We were well below. So on the soil oxygen level number, we want to stay above this 12% line. On the redox number, we want to stay above 400. And so we're trying to evaluate which one of these technologies we want to use going forward. And to be honest, I think the oxygen one is going to be more, based on what we learned here, I think the oxygen one is going to be more impactful. All of us are used to looking at soil moisture probes, and soil moisture probes are an awesome tool. I think they're necessary, we need to have them. But one of the things we learned, and I don't have the overlay with soil moisture on a graph yet, if I only looked at soil moisture, and I looked at, I think I just have a Centec probe here that I threw up. If we keep the soil moisture up in this band right here, we are driving the oxygen out of our soil. Okay, and so what we're saying is that a lot of our soil moisture probes create this saturated band, right? This is too wet, and then they create this green band of where they think we should be. And what we're finding with that oxygen sensor is that the actual band is probably like right here, and it's really narrow. There's a sweet spot, and if we only look at soil moisture probes, we may be keeping our soils too wet. So we're going to be doing more work with these oxygen sensors this year. If you're interested in following along or getting one of those, they're not super expensive, but I think it's going to help unlock maybe why some of our dysfunctions happen in the soil. Because if we don't have oxygen in the soil, things don't work right. This is especially true on heavy soils, right? Anything with clay loams, any of your silts. If it's sand, I probably wouldn't worry about this so much. But if you've got any of the silts, clays, or those mixes, I think it's super important that we start looking at this oxygen value and understanding what's going on in the soil.
So Kurt, where do you put that? You put it right pretty close to the plant then?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We don't know yet where to put them. We put it right at 10 inches is where we put it in at. And it's a permanent sensor. So it's got like a 20-year battery, you bury it, and it stays in the soil. But we think that 10 to 12 inches is probably the sweet spot where it needs to sit at.
And then more proximity to the plant.
We're doing the same thing on drip. We're doing the same thing what we do with the moisture probe, like that 8 and 8, like go down 8 inches over. So we're still kind of using that same rule of thumb that we do with the moisture probes. Yep. So, yeah, excited to see where this goes and kind of learn more about how that works. I'll touch just real briefly on automation. A lot of automation options when it comes to drip systems. We have a couple really good ones. The Galcon system that we use on a lot of systems, and then also Netafim came out with a new controller now that we're ready to start promoting called GrowSphere. Both of these are really good at remotely monitoring and operating drip systems. So just like you can run your pivots from your phone, we can do that same thing with drip now. Pressures, valve control, fertigation, all of those things we can do remotely. So definitely a lot of options that are available on the control side. I want to share just a couple quick success stories. One of them, we started doing work down in the Texas Panhandle last year. We've got a drip and pivot side by side down there, and this is in an area where they're running out of water. So they've got less than 2 gallons per minute per acre in this area. The drip irrigation, we applied 13.1 inches of water and achieved basically 31 ton per yield on corn silage. The pivot, they used 23 inches of water and 34 ton, And so if you look at the tons per inch, so water use efficiency, 1.4 on the pivot, 2.7 on the drip. So in areas where water is limiting, the water efficiency is really, really big. So super excited about some of that data. The other thing is alfalfa and forage crops. So we have a lot of producers, I shouldn't say a lot of producers, we have a number of producers who are either putting in forage crops or are looking at putting in forage crops for grazing. We have some on our own farm that we've done. We've taken it out of corn production and we put it into permanent grass, and we're starting a sheep herd. We've got some guys that are doing cattle. So if you're an out-of-the-box thinker and you're open to livestock, like livestock numbers right now are phenomenal compared to corn and soybeans. So something to think about. With drip, we applied hog manure of 1,000 gallons per acre after every cutting was taken, and we got up to 10 ton per acre. This is in northwest Iowa, in an area that typically does not raise 10 ton alfalfa. They did 8 ton on dry land, and they spent $300 an acre on synthetic fertilizer. We did 10 ton on the drip, and we didn't spend any money on synthetic fertilizer. We only did the hog manure. So kind of excited about some of the alfalfa stuff.
Is the drip line set 20 or 30 inch spacing?
40 inch actually.
40.
Yeah, on some fairly heavy soil though. So it's pretty, I would call it a clay loam soil, so the water moves pretty well. Yep. All right, we're getting close to planting. We actually started planting at home this week, so we got some corn and beans in the ground. Just kind of want to throw this up here. This is some work my brother did several years ago. You've probably all seen the emergence test. He took it a step further and took it to yield by row. Okay, so basically what he did is he flagged it, and then he went in and he harvested one row at a time. He did the full length of the field. So here is a 1 row harvest where he harvested, it would have been a half-mile field, and got the yield per row. And then he did 1/1000th of an acre by hand as well. What I want to point out here is that there is 32 bushel. No, it's bigger than that. We got 289 is our highest yielding row. Our lowest is 245. So what do we got? 44 bushel difference just based on the row on the planter, right? So if we're going to try to hit 300 bushel, which we keep trying to hit on our farm, and we always seem to come up short, we've got 44 bushel of opportunity we're losing just based on our planter. So there's nothing more important than what happens on the planter. Firm believer in that. But if you don't measure it, you don't know. Notice right in here, the center where you got a lot of compaction going on with the tractor. We also were trying different closing systems. So we had furrow force, fast track. This is the pinch rows, so they definitely showed up. And then had furrow force out on the outside. So just planting that seed of how do we focus on getting that planter right. If we could get all those rows to yield 289, our field average would have been, so our field average was 265. So if we could get them all up to that 289, we would have picked up 24 bushel just based on planter performance. Okay, one other thing I want to touch on with water quality. Nathan's going to talk more in depth, so I'm going to give you just the quick overview of some of this. Back in 2020, we had nearly ideal rainfall on one of our farms, and the corner out-yielded the pivot by 29 bushel. And we started asking why. Why would the corner out-yield what's being irrigated by 29 bushel? This is a field out by Holdridge. Same scenario. Good rainfall year. The corner was doing better than the pivot. And I'm not picking on pivots. This is going to happen on drip as well if you don't address water quality. But the point I want to make is that water quality matters, and it matters a lot. So we did at the time, we were working with Next Level Ag up in South Dakota, and they were doing the H3A or Haney extract. And so what we've got here is we have the Haney extract. This is the corner. And so if you look at calcium, so I've circled calcium. On the corner, we're at 2,900 part per million. On the pivot irrigated, we're at 3,000. Okay, so we're actually higher, we're higher underneath the pivot on the calcium underneath the pivot. But when we look at the H3A, which is the weak acid extraction, compared to what they use here, they use an ammonium acetate extraction, part per million is 337 versus 433, okay? So we saw a substantial drop in available calcium because of irrigation water tying up calcium, okay? So this is a super important point. We're going to spend a fair amount of time on it today. Nathan's going to talk quite a bit about it. If you just a high-level overview, we have to have a water sample to start with, okay? I've got two samples up here. I've got bad water on the left with an electroconductivity of 2.4. I've got good water here of a 0.26. Electroconductivity is the measurement of all of the salts that are in the water, okay? If I have reverse osmosis water and I put 120 volts in it and I stuck my hand over here, I would not get shocked, okay? If I start putting salt in that water, the electroconductivity is going to go up, and I'm going to start getting shocked. That's what this number is. It's telling us how much total salt is in that water. A 0.26 is really, really good. This is really good water. To my knowledge, there's only two places in the country that have water this good. It's Southwest Missouri, and it's Western Kentucky. Nebraska doesn't have any of this. I've never found it in Nebraska. Not even your canal water is this good, okay? You're probably also not this bad. This is really bad water. I picked a pretty hot one. But this is one of my cousins just 5 miles from us that has a well that comes out of a limestone aquifer. It's an artesian well. And notice how hard this water is, 1,800 part per million. On the hardness, the calcium's super high. Got really high sulfur, 463 part per million sulfur. So what's in your water matters, and we're going to talk quite a bit about that today. If you irrigate 9 inches of water, how many pounds per acre of each of these nutrients are you applying? Okay, so if we look at this, we're applying 9 inches of water. This is a Ward water sample. Ward automatically does these calculations for you. 222 pounds of sodium's going out of this field. Bicarbonate, 900. Sulfur, 152. But that's not plant available. That's sulfate. Okay, it's in the wrong form. So the plant, you can't credit that like you can on nitrate because it's not available to the plant. In a drip system, the two minerals that we're super concerned about are iron and manganese. Okay? So we go back here to these samples, we're less than a half a part per million. If we're less than a half part per million of iron and manganese, we should not see any plugging. But if we get high levels, we can potentially plug this up. So we have to get a water sample in a drip system so we know if this is going to cause a problem and create issues down the road. Here's one. We've got a part per million on sodium of 303. So for every 9 inches, he puts on 600 pounds of just sodium. So there's some really ugly water. This is up in South Dakota. Here's another one that's kind of in the middle, electroconductivity of 1.2. But again, on a drip system, we would say, well, this water is good. It is good enough to use, but this bicarbonate is going to cause problems, and Nathan's going to go over that in more detail later. One of the reasons that we have to start paying more attention to this red line here is the pH of rainfall from 1995 to 2020. Notice where we were in 1995. We were at a 4, so we were hovering about that 4.5 until 2020. And we checked some last year. I haven't checked any this spring, but last fall I checked some. Our pH was 6.5 on our rainfall. So this chart has continued to climb. It's up here now. Okay. The reason this matters is because the way you treat bad water is sulfuric acid or some kind of sulfur. And so we used to get free treatment every time it rained. It would kind of like hit the reset button. Where now we're not getting that anymore because the sulfur's been scrubbed out of the rainfall. Here's another graph that kind of shows the same thing. So SO4 is sulfur. This is in 1987. The rainfall had 37% sulfur in it in 1987. Okay? We go all the way to 2023. Actually, let's look at 2021. We're at 17%. So it's kind of a flat line in here. 15, 16, 13, 17. But notice what happens between 2021 and 2024. We go all the way down to 11% on sulfur in the water. in our rainwater. Okay, so they have continued to scrub it up, coal-fired power plants, fuel, all those things that keep cleaning it up, and the farmer is going to have to start buying more sulfur and addressing this issue because we don't get it free from the sky anymore. Irrigation water is your largest input on farmland, right? If we go back to these soil values and we add up these poundages, is there anything else that you're putting out 900 pounds an acre, 800 pounds an acre, 200 pounds an acre, right? Not very many things that you put that out every single year, year after year after year. And that's building up in the soil, and we need to start accounting for it. Okay, I think I'm going to stop with that. I guess I'll touch just a little bit on our manure stuff we're doing. So we have a portable trailer that we're going around and separating manure. If you follow us on social media, you've probably seen some of this. But one of the things we did last year is we took deep pit hog manure, and Jason Webster, Precision Planting, did a study for us where he used hog manure as starter fertilizer on the planter. Okay, 2 gallon, 4 gallon, 6 gallon. You got a 4.5, 9, and 12 bushel response, just using hog manure. Okay, he also added, then he went in and did a 20 gallon side dress plus 2 gallon foliar of hog manure. And that jumped that 4.5 to almost 14. So basically added another 9 bushel to each one of those by putting in another 20 gallon. We don't think the foliar did anything because we had some guys do straight foliar and did not see a response. So one of the things we're looking at is how do we take livestock manure, dairy, hog, beef, whatever it is, and turn it into a fertilizer, turn it into an asset. And so we have this portable trailer we're going around with this spring. We've got about 50 farms we're doing this for, where we're going in, separating fertilizer, separating manure, putting it in tanks, and then they're going to be applying it on the planter. So if you're interested in learning more about that or have livestock and want to dig into that, we're certainly open for more studies there. One of the reasons we think we're getting a response is because hog manure is 1% humic fulvic. Just regular hog manure, 1% humic fulvic. Okay? And so there's not that much fertility value in it. It's a very low fertility value, but there's about 1% humic fulvic. And so it's got a lot of value when it comes to that. So with that, I'm going to wrap up for now. Any questions, comments?
On that water, what do you like to see the EC at? What's the threshold?
What's the threshold? So I'll get the low end. So in California, they have a lot of snow melt. And they actually say that in snow melt, the water can be too clean and it will strip your soil of nutrients. So if they see the electroconductivity less than 0.25, they're adding gypsum to water. So if you go out to California, I've been out to the World Ag Expo a number of times, you'll find gypsum solubilizers, and that's why they use those, because they're actually trying to bring that electroconductivity back up to 0.25. Where do we start getting concerned? I would say once you get over that 1.5 or 2, you've got some serious antagonisms. There's antagonisms that happen in the middle, and so then it's really important to understand which mineral is adding to that electroconductivity. If it's sodium, if it's bicarbonate, those two are the biggest problem. And I would say 98% of water samples we see have very high bicarbonate, specifically in Nebraska. So bicarbonate, I would say if you have a bicarbonate higher than 150, you've got a problem. That's just a rough number. And I guess to take that a step further. Okay, so if you have a bicarbonate of 150, you take that number times 2, and that's how many pounds of cations you're going to tie up in your soil. Okay, so if you have a bicarbonate of 150, you're going to tie up 300 pounds of calcium, potassium, magnesium. You're going to tie up those nutrients in your soil on a 2-to-1 ratio. So understand that most samples in Nebraska are probably in the 300 to 400. Okay, I would say most water in this general geography is between 300 and 400 part per million. meaning you're tying up between 600 and 800 pounds of cations that you just paid for every time you water, or every season you're doing that. So, Nathan's going to talk more about that and some of the deeper testing we can do to actually identify which things are being antagonistic and what that looks like. All right.
I
Thanks.
think